Hiya folks, welcome to the lesson. What we are doing is in Photoshop we're going to create this cupcake graphic here. This is a great project for people that are still tweaking their digital painting skills, because while we'll use the paintbrush to draw the basic shapes, we'll use layer styles and the gradient tool to help give it a little extra pop. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop into Photoshop. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File, New, and create a new document. I have my units of measurement set to inches, and I want the width to be 5 and the height to be 7. Make sure the resolution is set to 300 and the color mode is set to CMYK. That way if you want to print it out later, it's going to look real similar to what we have on the screen, and it's going to look nice. For the background content, I'm just going to set this to white, and I'm going to hit Create. Then from here, I'm going to go to my Layers panel. If you can't find that panel, just go to Window and Layers and you'll find it. And we're going to make a new layer by hitting that icon that is the square with the plus sign in it. And on this new layer, I'm going to grab my Elliptical Marquee tool. If you don't see it right away, just right click on either the rectangular, single row, or single column marquee and you should see the tool nested in there. Go ahead and grab the Elliptical Marquee tool. And then before you start drawing, make sure your feather is set to 0 pixels. That way you get a nice hard edge on it. And holding either Alt or Option on your keyboard, plus Shift, we're just going to make a circle selection in the middle of our canvas here. I don't want to make it too big, something around that size. And then I'm going to pick a color for my frosting, because this is going to be the top of our cupcake here. Now you can either go to your color panel by going to Window, Color, and picking it out from here, or you can go to the lower left side of your screen and you'll notice there is another set of color pickers down here. You can just click on the foreground square, which is that top square, and just pick a color for your frosting. I'm going to pick a nice pink color. Then I'm going to hit OK. And then to paint this in real easy, I'm going to grab my paint bucket tool. The shortcut for that on your keyboard is G. If you can't find the paint bucket, just look for the gradient or the 3D material drop tool. If when you hit G, the paint bucket doesn't immediately show up, just hit Shift and then keep hitting G until the paint bucket tool shows up. Now I'm going to make sure that I have this layer that we just created selected. And then with my paint bucket tool, I'm just going to fill this circle in with that color I picked out for the frosting. Then I'm going to hit either Command or Control D. You can also just go to Select and Deselect. Now what I want to do is I want to trim off some of this circle here, because I don't need the full shape. I just need a dome for the top, and I need just a bit of a curve about halfway down the circle here. So rather than just grabbing the eraser tool and trying to freehand this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Elliptical Marquee tool, and I'm just going to make like a oval, and I'm going to add a slight curve to it, but I also want to erase a bit more of the circle here. With the marquee tool still selected, I can actually move this selection around without actually affecting the shape here. So I'm just going to move this so that way this edge here goes through about halfway through the circle, maybe a little bit below. And then I'm going to right click, hit Select Inverse. Then I'm going to grab my eraser tool. The shortcut for that is E. And I'm just going to erase this bottom half here. Then if I hit Command or Control D, you should see I've got this nice little dome shape now. Next is I'm going to go down to my Layers panel, and you'll notice we have that new layer we created, but we also have a layer called Background. I'm going to double click on that to make it an actual editable layer, and I'm just going to hit OK. And the reason I did this is because for this next part I need to make sure that this dome here is in the center of the piece. So I'm going to grab my Move tool And then I'm going to select both of these layers. I'm just going to click on one, hold shift, and click on the other. And you should notice that all of our align options at the top are highlighted and I can actually use them now. I'm just going to hit this align horizontal centers so that way I can make sure this dome is in the middle. And I'm going to go back and select this dome, and I'm going to switch over to my brush tool. The shortcut for that on your keyboard should be B. And you should notice at the top, at the very end, there's this butterfly with a dotted line through the middle. What this is our Symmetry Tool. And there are a whole bunch of different options for you to pick from. And what it will do is it will create an axis according to whatever option you pick, and it will reflect whatever you draw over that axis. So what we want is vertical. And you'll notice this blue line appears. Just hit the check mark or enter on your keyboard. And then with my brush tool, I'm going to make sure I still have that pink color that we used earlier, but I'm going to go into my brush settings. If you can't find this panel, just go to Window, Brush Settings, and I'm going to click on Shape Dynamics, and I want to make sure that my control is set to off because I do have a pressure sensitive tablet, which is great for painting and drawing, but for right now I want very clear, distinct, evenly sized circle, so I'm just going to turn the control to off for right now. And I'm just going to use a normal hard round brush, so that means the hardness needs to be set to 100%. And I'm going to set the size to 130. You might use a different size depending on how big you made your dome. But what I'm doing is I'm going to add a bit of scalloping to the bottom here. So that way it looks like a bunch of frosting has kind of piled up at the edge where the cupcake meets the paper wrapper. So I'm going to go to the very middle here, and I'm going to put a dot right there. Then I'm going to go either to the right or left side, and I'm going to put a dot right here, and you'll notice that wherever you put the dot, another one appeared at the same point on the other side. Then I'm going to go in the middle, add another dot, and then go in the middle on either side of that. So that way I've got this nice scalloped edge. If you have this issue where there are little white spots, you can just go in with your paintbrush and just fix those up. So I'm just going to double click on where it says layer 1. I'm just going to rename this frosting, so that way as we add more layers I can keep track of everything. So next I'm going to make a new layer again, and I'm going to drag this new layer underneath my frosting because this is going to be the paper cup that the frosting is sitting on top of. Now for this I'm going to pick a different color. I think I'm going to go with like a bluish purple. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. An easy way to zoom in and out of your piece is to hit Command or Control plus to zoom in, minus to zoom out. And then if you hold the space bar on your keyboard, it gives you the hand tool, which lets you move around the canvas real fast. But I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to pick a smaller brush size so that way it's easier to draw my cup and get a nice hard corner on it. And in order to get a nice straight edge, I'm just going to click once up here, press shift on my keyboard, hold it, and then I'm going to click down here, and you see I've got a nice straight edge for the side of my cup. So again, you just click once somewhere up here, press shift, hold it, and then just click where you want your endpoint to be, and it will make a nice straight line between the two. This effect works better if you don't have pen pressure turned on, because what happens is for some reason you'll click once, hold shift, and then click down here, and it kind of creates this weird tapered line. So if you want a straight edge like this, it's better to turn off your pen pressure before you do it. So then I'm going to add the bottom here, but this is kind of an awkward angle for me to draw at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit R to bring up my rotate canvas tool. It's down at the bottom over here. Also look for your hand tool if you can't find it and just right click. What that allows me to do is it lets me rotate the canvas to an angle that's much more comfortable to draw at, but it's not actually editing the project itself, it's just editing my viewpoint. So once I have it at a more comfortable angle to draw at, I'm going to add a curved or rounded bottom down here. There we go. And to reset my view so it's right side up again, I just hit reset view up at the top here. Then I can just make a big brush here and fill in the inside of my cupcake here. And if you want to clean up your corners to make them a little bit sharper, what you can do is find your Polygonal Lasso tool. Should be that third tool up at the top here. And what you can do is you can click along the edge and just kind of select that tiny sliver that you need to trim off. Then just use your eraser tool to trim it. You will need to do this on both sides, even with the Symmetry Tool turned on, just because of how the selection tool works. And then if you need to clean up the bottom here, you can just grab your paintbrush tool and do a little bit of spot checking. There we go. And then I'm just going to rename this cup. And then I'm going to make a new layer again. And I want to add some ridges to my cup here. So I'm just going to pick a slightly darker color than what I already have for my paper. I don't want to go super dark. I just want a slight discoloration. And you can kind of test it, see how it looks. I think I like that. I'm going to go slightly more blue. Yeah. So then I'm going to change my brush size to around 50. Again, you might be using slightly different numbers depending on how you want your cupcake to look and how big you've made it. Okay, so now once I have that color, I'm just going to go to the middle to add my first ridge. I'm just going to click up here, hold shift, and just drag down. I'm not going all the way to the edge of the cup. I'm going to stop a little bit before that. Then I'm going to add the last ridge you'll see on the right here. Again, I'm not going all the way to the edge. I'm just going to click once, hold shift, go up to the top, and click again. And I've got that nice line. If it's not quite parallel with the edge of your cup, you can always hit Command or Control Z and just redo it if you need to. Then I'm going to go in the middle between these two lines, click once, hold shift, click again, and now I've got the start of my cupcake here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some shadows to the ridges, that way it looks like it's dipping into the paper. But rather than painting them on the layer where I added my ridges, I'm going to double click on the blank space in this layer, and I'm going to add a layer effect to it. So I'm going to check mark inner shadow. I'm going to actually click on the title And I'm going to make some changes in here. I want to pick a slightly darker color than what I used over here. So I'm going to temporarily turn the opacity down to 0, so that way when I click on the square to change the color picker can easily pick up that purple, and I can pick a color to be my shadow. So I'm just going to hit OK. I'm going to leave the blend mode at normal. Then I'm going to change the opacity back to 100. I'm going to change the distance to 0. Put the choke at 0. And for the size, let's try 50, see how that looks. Let's try maybe 40. And you might be using slightly different numbers depending on how you want it to look and what sizes you've made everything. I think I'm going to go with 50 for the size. I'm going to lighten my shadow just a tad. And if you have this preview checked mark, you should be able to see what's happening over on your canvas as you make edits. So I think that'll be good. Then I'll just hit OK. And in order to turn symmetry off, I'm just going to go back up to that butterfly. If you don't see the butterfly, go back to your brush tool, click on the butterfly, and just hit symmetry off. So now we can start adding some asymmetrical elements here. So first off is I want to make this cupcake look like someone's taking a bite out of it. So I'm going to go back to my frosting layer. I'm going to grab my erase tool. And then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm just going to create like a C shape in here. And it might take you a couple tries to do that. Remember, R is the rotate canvas tool, and that will let you rotate the canvas to a more comfortable angle to draw at. There we go. Okay, now I've got like the C crescent moon shape here. So that's going to be the start of the bite. Before I add that part, I'm going to go down to my frosting layer. I'm going to double click to add a layer style to it. And I'm going to add an inner shadow. Now I want to leave the blending mode normal. For the color, I want to use a similar pink to what I have over here, but I'm going to pick a darker hue of it. I think that'll be a good color. Opacity, I'm going to leave it 100. I think 140 or negative 140 will work for the angle. For the distance, I'm going to set that to, I think 30 will work. Choke, I'll leave it 0. For the size, I don't want it too low, so I think I'm going to set it, I think around 150 should work. Then I'm going to hit OK, just so now I have that little bit of shadow to make it a bit more interesting. So now I'm going to go ahead and add, or at least start adding the details for my bite. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to zoom in a bit. All right, now you can get as creative with the inside of your cupcake as you want. You can either do just like a normal vanilla or chocolate cake texture, or you can have like a swirling cosmos in there. If you want, you can have bugs crawling out of it. You can get as creepy or as preppy with this as you want. For the sake of this tutorial, and so YouTube doesn't clutch their pearls, I'm just going to do a normal red velvet cake texture. So I'm just going to pick a base color. This is just so I can create the shape of the bite, and then I can add detail over top of it. But I think I'm going to pick a red. At least kind of a mid-tone red. And then for my brush size, I'm going to pick a nice tooth size because I do want to make it look like somebody took a bite out of it. So I'm going to add a bit of scalloping, kind of similar to what we did on the edge of the frosting here. I think 90 will be a good tooth size. And I'm on a brand new layer here. And before I add the first bite mark, you can see if I just click down, it's going to make a circle that goes outside of that crescent we just made. So with the bite layer still selected, I'm going to hold either Command or Control, and I'm going to click on the thumbnail for my frosting layer. The thumbnail is that little image there. When I click, you'll see it makes a selection around whatever was on that frosting layer. So now I have my bite layer selected. I'm going to add that first circle. Then I'm going to add the next tooth mark. I'm just going to keep going. Then I go down to the bottom, and I have to make sure that I have the same amount of ridges as I do on the top. So I need to count. So I need like 6 ridges down the bottom too, so that way it matches up at least a little bit. Okay, I'm going to call that good, and I'm just going to rotate this, and I'm going to connect to this edge with a curve. There we go, and then I'm just going to color in the middle. Just clean this edge up. I'm going to fix this part here. There we go. And now to get rid of the selection, I just hit Command or Control D, or just go to Select, Deselect. Now, whatever details you're going to add to the inside of your cupcake here, a handy little thing to do beforehand is with that bite layer selected, you'll see this little thing that says Lock in the Layers panel and a bunch of icons next to it. Go ahead and hit that first one, because what that allows you to do is when you go to start painting in your details, as you get to the edge, whatever you do will stop at that edge. So what I'm going to do is, in order to make my cake textures, I'm just going to do a bunch of scattered dots around the inside here. In order to do that really easy and really quickly, first I'm going to change the foreground and background colors here. I'm going to pick a red that's lighter than what I have, and then I'm going to pick a red that's darker than what I had. Then if I go to my brush settings, you can get to that panel by going to Window, Brush Settings. And I'm going to leave the pen pressure turned off, but I am going to turn on scattering. I'm going to make sure both axes are turned on. I don't want to crank the scatter all the way up, but I'm thinking like around 500, 550, somewhere in there will work. And then I'm going to go up to brush tip shape, and I'm going to space it out a bit more. That way the circles are less likely to overlap each other. Then I'm going to go to color dynamics. I'm going to turn that on. I want to make sure apply tip is turned on. I want to crank foreground and background jitter all the way up to 100%. Because what this does is it will look at these two colors over here, and it will jump between these two colors and every color in between them. I want to make sure the hue jitter is turned down to 0%, because what that does is the more you turn that up, the more it'll start adding random colors from the rainbow into there. I don't want that. I want to keep this within the reds. Saturation 0, brightness 20, and then purity 0. Then I'm just going to pick a smaller brush size. Now you can see as I start drawing, it's just scattering dots everywhere, and they are each different colors. So there we go. I think that's what I'm going to use for the texture of the inside of my cupcake here. But I want to add a few more details to kind of make it look like that we're actually biting into something that's icing covered. So we're going to add a bit more weight to the icing. And we're going to add a bit of a shadow to the inside of the cupcake here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add layer styles. So I'm just going to double click to bring up this layer style menus. And as long as I have preview check marked, I can see what's going on off to the side here. So first, I want to turn on stroke. And for the color, I'm going to pick a color that's similar to the pink of our frosting, but just a little bit darker. I hit OK. For the size, you can make your frosting as thick as you want. I think around like somewhere between 10 and 20 is going to work for what I have. Make sure the position is set to inside. Blend mode is normal. Opacity is 100. Then I'm going to add an inner shadow to it. And for the inner shadow, I actually want to pick a red similar to my inside here. So I'm just going to temporarily turn the opacity down so that way when I go to use my eyedropper to pick up the color, I'll just pick up the straight red. I'll leave blending mode at normal, bring my opacity back up to 100. Then I'll pick a darker red. There we go. For distance, I'm going to leave it at 30, choke 0. For the size, I'm going to mess with this a bit, see if I want it. I think around 90 is a good size for it. Then I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and start on adding a cherry. Now you can kind of get a bit creative with yours if you want to do like a dollop of whipped cream, or if you want to add like an eyeball or a gem to your cupcake, that's up to you. Either way, you're going to make a brand new layer. And then for me, I'm going to do like a maraschino cherry. So I'm going to pick a nice bright red. And then for my brush, I need to turn off scattering, turn off the color dynamics, and I need to set my spacing back to 1%. I want a nice big cherry, so I'm just going to turn my brush size up. I think 300. Yeah, that's a good size. And on my new layer, I'm just going to click once. Now I have my cherry. If I need to move it at all, I can just use the move tool, and I can hit Command or Control T to bring up the free transform if I need to resize it. But I think that is a good placement for my cherry. I'm going to go back to my layers panel, and next to lock, I'm going to hit that first option again, because we're just going to quickly add some shading to this cherry using our gradient tool, and we want to keep everything within the size that we've laid out for it. So I'm just going to hit G to bring up my gradient tool. If you can't find it, just hit Shift G and keep hitting G until the gradient tool pops up. Or find your paint bucket tool, right click, and gradient tool will be in there. First up is in order to change the color of the gradient, you can either pick one of the options that are in the drop down, or if you actually click on the color bar there, they'll bring this up, and if you click on the stoppers, you can pick custom colors to design your gradient. I just want 3 stoppers, 1 at each end and then 1 in the middle. This middle stopper, I want to be the same color as my cherry. This end, I want it to be a light pink because maraschino cherries are, they pick up highlights real well. Then I want a dark red for the other end to create my shadow. There we go. Then I hit OK. Up here at the top, you'll notice there are different types of gradients here. If you select that second one, that's going to be our radial gradient, and that will help give our highlights and shadows a bit of curve to them to make this cherry look spherical. So again, just make sure that you have that first lock option selected on your cherry layer. And then with your gradient tool, you can just click, and that first click is going to be where your gradient originates, and drag out to the very end of your gradient. You can see what it does. Try and keep your shadows on the same side as what we have down here already. So I think this is a good look for what I want. Then next I want to make a new layer. I'm going to put that layer behind the cherry layer. And this is going to be the stem for the cherry. I'm going to pick a color out for that. Maybe pick a more orangey red. There we go. And then with my brush tool, I'm going to turn the size down. For this, I am probably going to want pen pressure, so I'm just going to go back to my brush settings, go to Control, and turn pen pressure back on. And I'm just going to do a really quick flick to create the stem. There we go. So we've got the basic shape of the stem, so now I can just zoom in, use my Rotate Canvas tool, and just use my brush tool to kind of clean up the shape and make it more detailed. Cherry stems tend to have this little daub at the end, so I'm going to add that, and I'm going to thicken up the stem in places a little bit. I'm going to call that good. And you can always use your Move tool or your Free Transform tool to resize and readjust things as need be. Now I want this cherry to look like it's being kind of smushed into the frosting here. What I can do is I can just turn off the lock option and grab my eraser tool and just kind of get rid of the bottom of my cherry. But something I'm going to do is I'm going to use a mask. That way if I need to either move my cherry, rotate the cherry, or I need to make any more adjustments to it, I can just get rid of the mask and it restores my cherry to what I have here. It's a non-destructive way of editing. So I'm going to select my cherry layer. I'm going to click the icon in the layers panel that is the rectangle with the hole in it. I'm going to hit that. It's made a mask for me. And with masks, you got to keep in mind that black will hide things and white will show. So what I'm going to do is with a black brush, I'm going to turn my pen pressure back off because I want a nice solid round. I'm just going to add some scalloping to the bottom here to make it look like it's been smushed into the frosting. There we go. And then to help sell it, I'm going to go back to my frosting layers. I'm going to pick this pink back up, and I'm just going to add dollops behind the cherry so that way it looks like it's a bit more of a build-up going completely around the cherry and not just in front of it. So next is I'm going to make a brand new layer. I'm going to make sure this layer is at the very top of my list here. And this is going to be the layer we'll put highlights on. So I'm going to leave my pen pressure off. And I'm going to set up a white brush. And then I'm just going to add like little cell shading type shines to it. There we go, just something simple like that. Gonna add some to the cherry as well. And if you need to change individual parts, because we have this on a separate layer, I can just grab my Lasso tool and just kind of select the parts I want and then just nudge them where I need them to be. I can even grab my free transform tool. Yeah. And then these highlights are a little stronger than I want, so I am going to go to my opacity in the layers panel, and I'm going to bring this down to, let's say, 40%. Call that good. So now I have got my cupcake made, and it's time to start adding the background and embellishments. So before I do all that, I'm going to select my shine layer, go down to the bottom, hold shift and select my cup layer. And then I'm going to group these all together by hitting that little icon that looks like a folder. And now they're all in one group, and that's just going to help organize and move things around. So now I'm going to go down to this layer 0. I'm going to pick a background color. You can make whatever background you want. In order to make the background that I had in the example, I'm going to pick a light yellow. Then I'm just going to grab my paint bucket tool and just going to fill in that background with a light yellow. I think I might go even paler. There we go. I'm going to make my cupcake just a little bit smaller, so I'm selecting the group, hitting Command or Control T, and then just resizing it. And I can also move it. If you have an issue with the move tool where every time you click on something it goes from the group to that individual layer, just turn off auto select, and that will just stick to moving around whatever you have selected. I'm just going to nudge this down. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my background and I'm going to keep working on it. In order to create that pattern that I had on the example, what I'm doing is I'm just going to pick a darker yellow, might even go a bit more orange with it. I'll lighten it up a bit. There we go, I think that's good. And with pen pressure still turned off, what I did is I just picked a sizable brush. It's like around 185. And I just clicked once, held shift, went to where I want the line to go, and then just clicked again. And that creates the stroke there, and I can just click, hold shift, click on the endpoint to add more to kind of create this look. And then I just keep going throughout the piece, adding all the strokes that I want to it. So go ahead and make whatever background you want to have. If you need to, you can always turn off your Cupcake group. Alright, so there you go. You can make whatever pattern you want. Okay, so now I want to add a shadow underneath my cupcake here. In order to have a bit more room to work, I'm going to resize this. So I'm going to select my cupcake group. I'm going to grab my move tool. And then I'm going to hit Command or Control T. And then holding either Alt or Option, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Then hit Enter to get out of the free transform tool. And I'm just going to move this up a little bit. Alright, so now that I have a little bit more room to work, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to bring it underneath the cupcake layer. Then I'll just rename this. Now I'm going to grab my Elliptical Marquee tool. And I'm going to hold either Alt or Option plus Shift. And I'm just going to make a circle. Making it a circle is going to make it easier to edit with the free transform tools to make it fit underneath my cupcake. So that's why I have a circle rather than an oval right now. So for the color, I think I'm going to stick with a yellow, but I think I'm going to go a little bit darker and maybe add like a red tinge to it. Then I'm going to grab my paint bucket tool and just fill in that circle. And if you don't like the color of your shadow, just kind of pick a color that you like or that looks good with your background. Then I'm going to hit Command or Control D. And now I can hit Command T or Control T. And with the newer versions of Photoshop, when you go to scale things, it just automatically scales them proportionally. If you hold Shift, that will allow you to scale things out of proportion, and that's what we need to do for our shadow here, because what we want is a kind of oval shape going underneath our cupcake. We want the shadow to kind of go at a diagonal this way, so I'm just going to manipulate the circle until I get a good shadow underneath it. There you go. And I think that looks good there. So next is I'm going to add some text. I'm just going to add yum, yum, yum along the top and bottom here. So I'm going to grab my type tool by just hitting T on my keyboard. Okay, so the font is up here in this drop down here. You can pick out a font that's already installed on your computer, or if you want, if you click on this icon up here, it'll take you to Adobe Fonts and you can download a font from the Adobe library. I think you will have to close Photoshop and open it again in order for the fonts to appear in this list again. But Adobe has a really wide library that you can pick from, and they have some really creative fonts in there. And another thing about the font panel here is if you go up to filter, you can actually filter out your fonts depending on what kind you need. So you can set it to just looking at your serif fonts. You can pick like script type fonts. For what we're going to do, you probably want a more decorative font. And you can see it just takes it down to the more stylized fonts there. Now I already have an idea of the type of font I want to use. It's called Cheap Pine. And then I'm going to change the color over here. And I'm going to pick a red. I think I'm going to pick one of the darker red colors that you can find in my Cupcake here. I think that looks good, and if it doesn't work, I can always change it. So I've got my type tool, I've got the color set, I've got the font. I'm just going to leave it at regular. And then I'm just going to click once, and you'll see it puts my cursor up there, and I'm just going to type in yum, yum, yum. Then I just hit that check mark when I'm done, and I can use my move tool to put it into the canvas. I don't quite like how dark that red turned out, so I'm going to grab my type tool again. I'm just going to click in the text, then I'm just hitting Command or Control A to select everything, and I'm going to pick a lighter red. And I think that looks good. So rather than typing it out again, I'm going to grab my move tool, then hold either Alt or Option. And I'm going to hold Shift as well. And I'm just going to drag this down to the bottom there. And I really like this look. You can use whatever font you want. You can put whatever text you want to put in there. Something I like to do is for Photoshop files, is if I have text layers in there, you can see in your layer panel, text layers have the big T's on them. What I like to do is I will usually duplicate them, and you can duplicate layers by just selecting them and then dragging them to the new layer button. And then with those duplicates selected, I right click and I go to rasterize type, and what it does is it changes them from live type layers to actual graphics. So I can't ever go back and edit the text again, but if I ever open up this file on a different computer that doesn't have that Cheap Pine font, I do have the graphic version of the type already set in there, so I don't have to worry about losing my text or my font. And then since I don't really need these layers separate, I'm just going to right click and merge them as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and call that good. And now we have our finished product. Go ahead and save it. Teach Me That does have a Twitter and a Tumblr now. So if you post your version of these projects to social media, go ahead and tag us so that way we can see what you guys are doing. Hope you had fun with this one. See you next time.